So it was a pivotal test for the South Korean president as he grapples with pressing challenges in security, diplomacy, and the economy. For more on the high-stakes meeting and relations between Seoul and Washington, we're joined by Professor Christophe Gaudin, Professor of Political Science at Kookmin University. Professor Gaudin, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me. Good morning.
So this was the first face-to-face meeting between Presidents Ijeong and Donald Trump, and it lasted almost 2.5 hours. And a lot of issues were addressed there, including security issues, North Korea relations with Japan, and economic cooperation in fields like shipbuilding and energy. What's your overall assessment of their summit?
Well, I think your report summarized it all. During his campaign, for the most part, President Lee dodged international issues. And now, after the summit, and after also the summit he had with the Japanese Prime Minister a few days ago, we can tell what his diplomacy is to look like. It was proactive, and President Lee looked very prepared during this meeting. 2 points I'd like to highlight to answer your question. First, the fact that this summit lasted so long is very interesting because what we saw during this meeting and what also the American media noticed is that President Lee was able to use flattery in order somehow to address President Trump's issues and to address what many observers refer to as President Trump's, how should I put it, lack of reliability. So President Lee showed prepared, and also he came with very concrete proposals, in particular regarding American shipbuilding. So this so-called make American shipbuilding great again. So long story short, this meeting was productive. President Lee looked prepared, and the tone of the meeting, as your reporter noticed, became increasingly friendly as the meeting went. So for the most part, as far as we can tell for the moment, the results are very positive for the most part.
Right, and the summit took place amid concerns that President Lee is viewed as being pro-China, and as he faced a number of tasks on security and trade issues. What would you say was his top priority during this visit to the U.S.?
Well, you know, from President Trump's perspective, I think that anybody who is not a Republican will be called an enemy. So in this case, pro-Chinese, for instance. Another point is that because precisely of President Trump's tariffs, the Korean diplomacy, even before the election of President Lee, has tried to secure ties with China. Hence this pro-China reputation that President Trump made to President Lee. So the main objective of President Lee was somehow to reassert this American-South Korean alliance. And it's very interesting to see that in your report, every time, consistently, President Lee spoke up, it was to highlight that this alliance is to continue, how strong it is, and that it is a strong foundation of South Korean policy. So his main objective, I think, was to save an alliance from an unreliable partner, and eventually, of course, his end goal was to lift tariffs. So that's probably President Lee's end game. But of course, we will need to wait and see in order to tell whether these tariffs are to be lifted. For the moment, South Korea needs to pay a 25% tariff to export to America to be lifted to 15%, maybe more, but that, of course, only time will tell.
Right. The two countries, they both focused on building alliance, and a lot of attention was on how the two sides would handle security issues, especially as, Donald Trump has pressed Seoul to shoulder more of the costs needed to have U.S. troops stationed in South Korea. And Trump actually said he wants the ownership of land that South Korea has leased for U.S. military bases. Would you say that he's possibly trying to use this as a bargaining chip to pressure Seoul?
Obviously, this came as a surprise, honestly, not only to me, but I think to most observers, and maybe actually to the South Korean government as well. To be honest, I don't even know how this could be done from a legal point of view. How is it that the South Korean government could give up on massive portions of land like this? I honestly have no idea. What we can tell is that President Trump is obviously trying to take everything he can from his allies. That's the way he's acting not only with Korea, but with Europe, with Japan, with all of US potential partners. So, as you said, this land ownership is just one more bargaining chip that President Trump is trying to use in order to get more advantages from South Korea. I don't think it is very serious. Frankly, I don't think this is a major issue. The major issue is tariffs and how these tariffs can be lifted. And in fact, this land ownership thing is probably just one more form of leverage that President Trump is trying to use in order to pressure the South Korean government.
I see. And on North Korea issues, Trump said he looks forward to meeting with North Korea's Kim Jong-un within this year. And President Lee also encouraged Trump to meet Kim, saying he wants Trump to be the peacemaker and he'll be the pacemaker. So do you believe the summit could open the door to talks with the North Korean leader pretty soon?
I think it's a smart move from President Lee. Because you know that President Trump's pet project is to be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. So that's a way, of course, to flatter President Trump's ego on the one hand, and on the other hand, that's a way to resume dialogue with North Korea. Because last time a progressive President Moon Jae-in in South Korea tried to do so, in reality, you know that he wouldn't get anything from North Korea. So from President Lee, that's a way to try to renegotiate with North Korea, but not directly, using President Trump's ego. That said, maybe these talks are to resume, but I do not think anything substantial will come out of this for a very simple reason. Because finally, what is the only objective of South Korea is here. South Korea wants the North to give up on nuclear weapons. And we know that the North is never to give up on these nuclear weapons. And on top of it, the recent move of Kim Jong-un to get closer and closer to Vladimir Putin's Russia, as you can imagine, doesn't speak very highly when it comes to his ambition to drop nuclear weapons, to denuclearize the Korean peninsula, and more generally, to make peace with South Korea. As Kim Jong-un is moving closer and closer to Russia, it makes it more and more unlikely that he is to drop eventually his nuclear capacities, which is the only aspect the South is concerned with from a military point of view, I think.
Right, dealing with North Korea is a difficult issue indeed. All right, Professor Gaudin, thank you so much for your insight today. We appreciate it.
Pleasure was mine. Have a nice day.